What's up, guys? You're listening to another episode of Selling on Amazon with Andy Isom. Guys, we're back with another special guest today. I've got John Lee, the co-founder of PickFu, joining us today. John, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, Andy, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Quick background, guys. If you haven't already heard this episode 333, I released that one back in March of 2024. I talk about how to virtually launch products using PickFu. And to rewind just a little bit, John, I know me and you talked about this. We talked in person at Amazon Accelerate this year, but I first heard about PickFu actually at the Alibaba Co-Create conference in Las Vegas last year. So I went to that conference, focused a lot around Alibaba, but there was different booths and other, vendors and third-party companies there. And I believe, I can't remember, John, if it was you or your co-founder, Justin, who was speaking up on kind of the main stage. I think it was a panel, if I remember correctly. And he was talking about PickFu, and I was like, wow, this is a really, really interesting, software tool company. So I went home, researched it, looked it up, and started dabbling a little bit in it. And, then a few months later, I was like, we gotta make an episode on this. And since then, some of my agency clients have been using PickFu. And obviously, like I said, we met at Amazon Accelerate this year and we're like, we got to get you on the podcast. So John, tell us a little bit. I'm really interested just to hear a little bit more about your backstory, about how you guys got started. I know that you and your co-founder, Justin, were doing other online business models back in 2008 when this idea kind of sparked, or maybe a need sparked, to create this software. Could you tell us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I think it was my co-founder, Justin, who was speaking on a panel at Co-Create last year. And so that's awesome that you learned about it from that. Yeah, so to get into the backstory of PickFu, Justin and I have been working together for a really long time. We both have software engineering and product manager backgrounds. And we were both actually working at large tech companies like beforehand. So I was actually at Microsoft before doing this. And we had always wanted to build a business together. So like all entrepreneurs, all young aspiring entrepreneurs do, we just kind of pulled the plug, jumped ship, and started building, not really knowing what we were doing or anything. Fast forward a couple of years, we had been working on this project that was, it was a restaurant menu directory, actually. So, like takeout menus, trying to digitize that, put that all online. Again, going back to our backgrounds as more software developers and product designers, we didn't have a strong design background, but it was just the two of us, and we needed to build, we were doing a redesign at the time. And so we were always like butting heads in terms of deciding should the headline say this or this? Should the UI look like this or that? And then you talk to your friends and family, and they're at a certain point, they're just kind of tired of giving you feedback. They're obviously biased. The best practices at the time were to go to a coffee shop and get unbiased feedback. And we're like, yeah, we should get unbiased feedback. Sure. But, going to a coffee shop, my mom told me never to talk to strangers, right? And, it's a little awkward and takes a lot of time. And so being sort of the nerdy engineers that we decided to actually build the product that could go and get us unbiased feedback for our designs. So we built PickFu. That was like the first iteration of PickFu. That was over a dozen years ago. And what we did, that was a tool for ourselves, and we just put it on the side, and it kind of took on a life of its own slowly, right? But it resonated with people from very, entrepreneurs from very different industries discovered it, like self-publishing authors who want to test a book title or book cover before they go publish, right? Or people who are developing mobile games who really want to understand how they can win in the App Store in the sort of that competitive marketplace, either by optimizing their app icons or improving their game art, because it's, like when you're working on a business, you're working really, really hard, maybe in your in your proverbial garage or somewhere else before your product sees the light of day. And if you can get feedback earlier in that process, why wouldn't you? And so that we found that was working really well for other people, is working really well for us. So at some point, a couple of years back, we decided to pivot, focus fully on PickFu, and we've been growing it ever since.
I think maybe I can call this a misconception or a belief. Let's call it this, a common belief I think that exists in just the entrepreneurial world in general. I talked to dozens of people who want to get started in e-commerce, specifically, starting their own brand on Amazon, is this belief that they can't talk about their idea before it's launched. Like I can't get feedback. I can't tell people about, my branding, my logo, my design, what product. And I get that there's, a little bit of, IP there, right? Especially if you have a very innovative product, you want to be careful with that. But then at the same time, I've seen so many instances where people are so scared or nervous or for whatever reason, right? They don't want to get feedback, unbiased feedback, right? That's, I think, the important thing, like you said. And, they start their brand, they launch their product, and it's a complete flop because in their mind, they start to kind of get romantic with their own ideas and they fall in love with the concept, when in reality, maybe it's something that the market doesn't really want. Why do you guys think that external, market validation, unbiased opinion, that's the important thing, I think, right? Why do you guys think that is so important early on in the process for any type of business owner?
Yeah. And I think it's super important because honestly, it's the unbiased part. It's getting that feedback, that raw feedback from people who have no skin in the game. They don't care, right? Like your friends and family are obviously biased. Your business partner is going to be biased. Like you guys have something riding on this. You have something riding on this. And so you never want to, obviously you never, as entrepreneurs, it's important to have positive self-talk and be optimistic about your ideas and the opportunity that you see ahead. You wouldn't be an entrepreneur otherwise, right? But you need that balance of someone else who's going to give it to you straight. And oftentimes your circle of friends, your family, the people in your business are not going to give it to you as straight as it could be. So getting that unbiased feedback from people who have no skin in the game is super important because essentially it increases the chance of success and even almost more importantly, it reduces the risk of failure. Like you would, if you know that something's going to be a flop or that your target, that idea is not resonating to your target audience, the sooner you can pivot, change the features, change the color, change the design, change something else, you're basically able to test in the sandbox before you put in further effort to launch that product. And so with PickFu, I think that's the value that we're providing is that, it's like we describe ourselves as a digital focus group with millions of global consumers, and they're all under NDA before they actually go and provide feedback on anything that you put in front of them. And so we've heard this feedback from a lot of our users, which is like, oh, I can actually go crazier with my ideas on PickFu, knowing that it's not live testing. So it's not going to affect my sales. Like it's not a live A/B test, right? It's on PickFu's panel. So graphic designers, brand designers, they can actually be more creative and explore more interesting ideas and concepts on PickFu and test and understand what's going to resonate before they iterate and launch.
I'm really glad that you pointed out the NDA element there because I think that adds a lot of comfort for people who may be considering using a tool like this to make sure maybe their, proprietary ideas are kept a little bit more safe there. So I just want to highlight how PickFu kind of works for you guys. Again, I know I talked about a little bit more about it in that previous episode. And John, I want to get obviously your expert explanation on this as well too. But basically guys, you come to this website, it's a database full of tons of different people, different demographics, and you can run all sorts of polls. So if you guys are listening, you can go to pickfu.com. I'll put a link in the description that you guys can click to, but you can maybe like browse right now, check it out and kind of get a feel for the different types of polls you can run. You can define your audience. You can choose, I want someone who is an Amazon Prime subscriber. I want someone who's a parent. I want someone who's 25 years old. So you can really nail down on your target demographic. And then there's all sorts of polls. Like there's a lot of polls, and we're going to talk about maybe some of the ones you would recommend, John, a little bit later here for Amazon sellers. But again, the beauty of this, guys, is the unbiased opinion of it. Because these people, like John said, they have no skin in the game. I know a lot of people that I've worked with, students of mine, listeners, clients, where they say, oh, I posted it on my Instagram and, I posted a poll on my Instagram and the response was really good. And it's like, yeah, that's good. That's probably one step up from, asking your mom if she likes your idea. But still, it's like there's going to be a ton of bias. Like your Instagram followers, like, they know when they answer a poll that you can go and see, oh, Sarah voted yes or no for my poll, right? So there's always going to be a little bit of bias there versus this. There's no personal connection. They don't know you. You don't know them. So they're going to be much more willing to give you their pure, honest feedback. Here's kind of a question here, John. So someone, let's say they come on, and again, you can clarify if I missed anything on how kind of the core element of it works, but they come on here and they can run polls for, let's say, 10 responses or gosh, I don't know, maybe thousands of responses. What is the number of responses that you think becomes viable? Or like, I guess we could say like statistically significant, right? Because I don't know, maybe you run it for 10 people and you're like, does that really tell me that much? Or 100 people, or here's another question. Sorry, I'm getting maybe too deep on this, but I'm just thinking from my own perspective. Could it also be damaging to run a poll maybe for like too many people where maybe it like sways you in the wrong direction? I just hear so many stories, success stories. I listen to How I Built This, the podcast, all the time. I love that show. But you hear so many success stories where on paper, the idea maybe sounded crazy. Like this was never going to work. Strangers are never going to ride in someone's car for Uber. And then, it turns into a massively successful company. So do you think there's danger as well in leaning too much into unbiased opinion and not trusting your own intuition?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So let me take a step back and sort of go over some of the parameters on PickFu, right? So like you said, yeah, we are a panel that you can tap into of unbiased global consumers. We actually tap into the same consumer panels that the big CPGs like Procter and Gamble, Mondelez, and so on, that they use for their market research studies. So the same way that they would find people to determine, the next smell of their shampoo or sort of the design of the next cereal box or something. We're tapping into those same panels, except we're kind of shortcutting all the middlemen, third-party consultants, all of that stuff with software and building all of it in with, really high levels of quality control and demographic targeting and all of that. So our software allows you to tap into these panels, and you can choose when you're running a poll, you can choose between 15 to 500 people to answer your questions. The other thing with PickFu is that every single poll requires the panelists to give a detailed written explanation. So on PickFu, you can go on and compare, let's say, up to 8 different options, right? Like images, video, audio, text. So for e-commerce and Amazon sellers, a really big use case is comparing main images, like either trying to figure out the right variation to put up on Amazon to improve your sales, or comparing your main image against your competition to understand what might be driving the click of your competition instead of yours. So you can put up to 8 images, ask the audience, like if you're buying this kind of dog product, which one would you choose, and so on. And then you go and read the responses from those 15 to 500 people. And what I like to say, and then I like to joke about it, like people come for the votes, but they stay for the responses. Because oftentimes, everyone, when they think about testing, they think about votes and like counts and numbers. Like people are just drawn to, oh, this one got more votes than this one. But I think the real value that PickFu unlocks is that because you're able to run these polls and get really high quality insights in those written responses, it's actually about reading the responses and understanding what's motivating those potential buyers, either for you or against you, right? And for a competitor. So our recommendation is that you don't want to run polls that are actually too large. Particularly, we've seen much better results when you do iterative testing. So running polls that are, maybe 30, like let's say you're optimizing your main image. It's better to run multiple polls that are maybe targeted at 30 or 50 people. Like go run the poll. Typically polls for 30 to 50 people to your target range, they'll finish within about 30 minutes to an hour. So you can your designer can run a poll, go grab some coffee, come back, read the results, understand from the results, and we provide AI summaries for this as well, what the key points are, take those insights, do another iteration, run another poll, rinse and repeat. And it's that iterative process of running 30 to 50 person polls that gets you to a much sharper final product than just running like one big poll and saying that's it, right? Maybe at the end of that process, you probably want to validate, if you've been iterating on the main image, you probably want to validate your final image with your competitors again. Maybe you choose a larger audience at that point. But during that iterative design process, you probably want to be running shorter polls, iterative polls, and so on.
Oh, I really like that. I need to repeat that. I'm repeating this for myself actually to remember this, because if you think about it, guys, you could run a poll to, like John said, 500 people, right? And you can get a ton of data, tons of written responses. You'd have a whole bunch of data. But a smarter way to go about it is kind of like the Facebook. I think about this like back from other businesses where I'd run a lot of Facebook ads where, you could put up one ad, one headline, body of text, image or video, throw $1,000 at it, and then like it works or it doesn't work. But a better alternative to that for those of you who do, online advertising is A/B testing, split testing, right? Some buzzwords that people throw out there where, you're comparing two different advertising versions, and maybe you only change one thing. Maybe you just change the headline, and instead of running $1,000, you run $50 and $50. Which one performs better? Great. Now you iterate the body or the image, right? And you just keep iterating. And then by the time you get to that, okay, now I'm going to spend, $1,000, you already have done all the iterations, the testing to find that winning ad that you can scale, which I think translating this over to this example is, we're doing small iterative tests, whether it's a product concept, whether it's design, whether it's packaging, whether it's main image, and, test, get feedback, change. We have a real case study on this, guys. One of our agency clients, we did this it was a few months ago. It was maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Right after, soon after I released that episode in March, where I was like, one of our clients, his conversion rate and click-through rate on Amazon wasn't great, but the product was. I mean, we truly believed that. And so we're like, this is a great product. The price is great. The reviews are great, but let's get that click-through rate up, right? Get more traffic coming from the search results to his listing, and then get that conversion rate up a little bit. So we thought we need to revamp your packaging. His images, most of the images were based around the packaging of his product. And so we said, let's redesign the packaging. So my team, we started working with our in-house designers, and we came up with some new packaging concepts. And we came up with a few different concepts that we just, through our own intuition thought, yeah, these look better than what you have. But we said, you know what, let's go run one of those PickFu polls and see what happens. So our client went and he spent, and I think he did 50 or 100 responses or so. And the results actually surprised me, because I was the one that was kind of driving a lot of the design inspiration of the packaging redesign. And I was actually corrected on some of my theories on what I thought would be better for this product. And turns out there was elements, again, trying to keep things pretty vague here. There are elements of the previous packaging that customers really liked. And we knew that because we read the responses. The new design won. It was like 60-40. It was close, but the new design won. However, we wanted to know, okay, if 40% of the people still like the old design, what is it that they still like? And a lot of people said this one specific element of the old design. So then we went and we redesigned again, and we implemented that feature of the old design into the new design, and then split tested it again, and it severely outperformed. It was like 70-30, 80-20 at that point. So that was like a brilliant breakthrough that, you can spend a couple $100 testing, which you think about it, guys, like downstream effects of this. Click-through rate, I mean, if your click-through rate goes from 2 to 4% or conversion rate goes from 2 to 4%, that's thousands of dollars over the lifetime of a product. So awesome example there, John, of doing the iterative kind of testing there. Another question for you on this topic. I know this question's going to come up because if it's a question that I think of, I know that there's 100 other people thinking this probably. We're trying to be smart with our budget. Okay. I'm just thinking about, a lot of people that listen to my podcast, their moms and dads, they're small startups, they're bootstrapping this. They're wanting to make this happen, and they're investing, a good portion of money, but they're trying to be smart with their budget. They're investing in a tool like Helium 10 or Jungle Scout. They're doing their market research. They're figuring out, cups, mugs, whatever it is. They find that's the product that sells. The numbers say it's going to sell. And I've looked at Amazon and I see this type of design is the best seller. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to sell a 3-pack because the numbers on Helium say 3-pack's the top seller. Why should we use a tool like PickFu instead of just relying on market analytics from Helium 10 or Jungle Scout?
That's a fantastic question. Let me add one thing to what you described, because that case study is so awesome. When you were talking about the polls identifying that one element that element that shall not be named, right, on the image. I think another poll type that we have that might be really interesting for that in the future is that we actually offer click tests. So you could put that image
Mm.
up on PickFu and have panelists click, and you can ask, your own question, like what elements are the most compelling here? Get a bunch of clicks, you'll get a nice heat map of exactly what of that image, or your competitor's image, or a screenshot of the SERPs, like search results. You can, and like our panelists will click exactly on what's meaningful to them and tell you why. So also a really nice way to sort of crowdsource the elements that appeal to audiences. So that's, for future polls, we've seen good success with that. Towards your question about why use this kind of testing instead of Helium-10 or Jungle Scout, I don't think it's an instead. I think it's a together kind of thing.
Mm.
I think that tools like Helium-10 and Jungle Scout help you identify market opportunity where you want to put your efforts into putting something into the market, right? So we've decided that we want to go in with like, let's say like mugs, right? Like coffee mugs. We think that there's an opportunity there. We find a supplier somewhere else. We believe we have this angle on this coffee mug where there's opportunity, and we use those tools to figure out, okay, there is enough market opportunity that we want to go in. Tools like PickFu help you differentiate yourself, your product, and your listing once you're in that market. So now you're in the Amazon search results. Now you're trying to show up for these keywords that you've already researched, like, insulated coffee mug, travel coffee mug, all of these other things. Now you can use a tool like PickFu when you're going into those keywords and into those categories to understand exactly how consumers are shopping, how they're perceiving the
Mm-hmm.
competition that's going to be your competition once you show up for the keywords that you want to show up for. And so I think the two go hand in hand in terms of both identifying market opportunity and then optimizing your performance once you're in that market. I'll give you another story. So we work with all the aggregators and some of the biggest sellers on Amazon. And I think some of the really sophisticated sellers, I was talking earlier about testing earlier in the process. Some of the most sophisticated sellers that we've seen, they actually work backwards from the search results and the listing in their product design process. So let's say for nutritional supplements or like pet supplements, a lot of it is about the packaging and sort of the image. We have seen a lot of users who will actually go, even before launching the product, they'll grab the best-selling or the top ranking organic listings for a target keyword, and they'll be running PickFu polls on them to understand what the key elements are of what's going to drive, like what are the key elements in the best performing images for a keyword that are going to drive the click. Then they actually have their designers designing even before the product is launched, right? Like they're designing in a vacuum in this sort of safe sandbox on PickFu and doing that iterative process. And they've already finalized their main image before they launch like into this category because they know they can put spend behind it and get the purchases and get the reviews and all that stuff. So they're building this in secret, iterating, and knowing that by the time they can actually launch, by the time it comes to launch, they already know exactly what that main image is going to be, and they have a great idea of how they're going to how that image and that listing is going to perform once they put it out there on the market.
Wow. I actually I got like some goosebumps thinking about that. Because I have a big project coming up. I just launched a new program, kind of a done for you program where we, kind of build and launch a brand from scratch for clients. And we have our first client. We're excited about this project. So I'm already like thinking in my wheels are turning like, ooh, I'm excited. I really like that angle of trying to figure out the product, kind of almost like working backwards. It's so much like YouTube. I mean, I've been posting on YouTube for years. I've had other YouTube channels, and a lot of the big YouTubers, Mr. Beast, for those of you listening, I know a lot of people know who that is, but he's come out and said a lot of times, like, you start with a thumbnail. You start with before you even like, and like the hook or the title of a video. Before you even plan, like, all right, what's going to be in the video? Like, what's going to be the story plot? It's like, no, he's like, I think about the thumbnail, and then I think about the title, And then if the thumbnail's good and the title's good, then I plan the video. And I say, oh, I can make this into a good video if those are going to perform. So this is what this is reminding me of. It's like you're already, I mean, that main image, that's why I think I was thinking about a thumbnail, but you're already designing backwards from winning formulas, winning products. And then you're already getting that feedback before you go out and spend all this money developing the product, right? Because another big risk, right, with e-commerce, with physical products is if you're customizing this, you're going to be paying for molds, tooling, things like that in a lot of cases, which can be very expensive. So it makes a lot of sense to make sure that your end, like I love how you said that, like your end listing. It's like you almost have your entire listing envisioned, and you've used Helium, you used Jungle Scout, so you know like pricing and all that, and like the numbers behind everything, but you can just test what your listing would be like after the product is launched and have much more confidence. Like, okay, this is what I know I have to create in order for this to work. Now you just work backwards and you take that to your supplier development team and turn it into a real product. Very cool. I really like that. I really like that idea.
Speaking of YouTube, we have actually seen some YouTubers use PickFu to test their thumbnails. And like, I know recently there was something that came out from the MrBeast team talking about how they approach building content. And I think they were saying that thumbnail on the hook is worth about 33% of like the views and the drive the views and the value of that video. So it's definitely super important to get that right.
I have a page, guys. I have a cool download. I'm going to share this with you guys because I think this will be really valuable for you guys to see some of the best ways to use PickFu as an Amazon FBA seller. But John, I just wanted to ask you specifically while you're with us on the podcast. I know we've talked about a few already. We've got some good use cases here, but maybe what are top ways that you've seen Amazon brand owners make the most of PickFu to, improve their results?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the one thing that most Amazon sellers know us for is testing main images, right? So I guess you can think about it, depends on where you are in your Amazon journey. If you have a product out there and you want to get more sales, then PickFu is fantastic for optimizing your main image, but also optimizing your listing. So obviously with main images, we've been talking about that, right? Like testing, iterating on variations and testing against them, and then also testing against the competition to understand what's motivating the shoppers to click on either them or you, and using those insights to optimize your main image. That's if you're already selling. Another thing you can do on your listing is, imagine PickFu, it's just a source of potential like consumer feedback, right? So another thing that we see sellers do is that who are already selling is that they'll actually put in the link to their listing and actually ask sellers, or ask the panelists, hey, go check out this Amazon product listing, like review it and let me know what questions you have, right? Because that surfaces the potential buyer questions, like questions that buyers are having when they're actually looking at your product. So that's like essentially crowdsourcing a whole list of potential fixes for your existing product page, right? So that's for if you're already selling right now. If you're launching a product, that's even a better time to be testing, right? Because we see testing packaging, doing sort of that reverse engineering of the right main image to put out there, testing features and bundles, right? Like, would you buy this by itself or this and together for so on? We've seen a lot of sellers who, we've had some great success stories where they told us, I had this idea where I wanted to make this modification, but then that would increase my COGS. And so I'd have to like set my sale price at this point to get the right profit. But I put that out there on PickFu, like A or B, right? Either with this feature for this or without this feature for this. And my soul was crushed because I thought that this awesome feature was great, but the audience didn't find it valuable. So that actually saved them a whole bunch of money from like putting in a PO and spending however much it was to get that developed. And instead they could pivot their idea and work on something else. So sort of the testing earlier as early as possible is going to get you really good results.
And again, one of my favorite or almost like most important uses of PickFu and doing, market research like this, guys, are for design-based products. Like if you have products where there's a design element to it, I think a lot of textile stuff. Like I'm thinking about my own product. Like we sell dog bandanas. That's like our core product. And they have designs, right? Printed designs, patterns, things. But I've had dozens of students sell design-based products, textiles, linens, towels, fabrics, clothing, things like that. Anything that has like some sort of printed design element. This is a really, really smart thing to do. Get a handful of different concepts, ideas from a designer, especially if you're going to start with one or two, and do some iterative testing on your designs against some of the top selling designs out there on Amazon, because that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and sorry, one other thing I forgot to mention, figuring out the right variations. Like we've talked to people who, like stock notebooks and try to figure out the right colors and the right cover designs and so on. And so they've told us, yeah, we choose our designs using PickFu because I don't want to stock something that's not going to sell, right?
Yeah. Guys, I want to show you something really cool here. So at the beginning of the episode, John actually started a poll for my website, for our Weavos agency website. Let me share a screen here. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you can see this. If not, if you're listening, you can head over to YouTube and watch the video version of the podcast. But check this out. So we're running this poll here. And the question that John set up for me is, after reviewing this webpage, what questions do you have about this service? You can see here in real time, like there's people answering the poll right now in real time. 4 respondents are answering. And if I scroll down here, I can see I've got a whole bunch of responses already. I've got 12 responses just in the time, we've been on this podcast for a few minutes. Yeah. And look at like, there's so much valuable information. So I can take this and say, what's the average cost of the service? These are things that I could update to my, my website for our agency services. And these are questions that people might have, if they're landing on my page. And if I can add, see, look, like this one, what are the actual testimonials? There's text heavy explanations, but maybe there's other stuff. I want financial documents. Okay. How long have we been operating? Is the service cost the same for all types of services? What's the time zone the employee is going to be in? Why would I trust the company? So all sorts of good, feedback here that I can think about. Not only, here's the thing, not only for like, oh, let me go and update my homepage, but like content creation, right? Like this is like, hey, I can create content around these questions. I mean, I've got 12 questions. Well, some of these aren't questions, but I've got a ton of questions here that like, that's an Instagram post right there, right? So very cool. Thanks for doing that. That's really cool. John, I want to close out. I like to ask pretty much every guest who comes on my podcast this kind of question. And I know it's cliche, but people really find these types of questions and answers really interesting. You being an entrepreneur yourself, right? Starting multiple businesses, running PickFu for, the past 15 years or so. What's one big piece of advice you would give to someone who's trying to build their own business?
I would say validate your assumptions, honestly. And that's not just because, of PickFu, but I think that looking back in sort of my past entrepreneurial journey, there have been so many times where, time and again, you get really excited about your own ideas, really excited, right? Like any entrepreneur is going to have so many ideas. And there have been countless times where I've tried to put those ideas into practice and they completely fail, right? And I look back at those and hopefully as a learning lesson, I realize, well, I could have shortened all that time and all that pain by figuring out the right validation earlier in the process. And I wouldn't have had to like spend all this time and money and effort and all this other stuff. And so I think that lesson, I would say personally, I have not learned that lesson, as fully as I probably should. It's always a process, but I do recognize that pattern looking back of, okay, well, I had this idea, it failed. I had this idea, it failed. I had this idea, it failed. And like, I could have saved myself a bunch of time and effort and like misery from doing the proper validation of my assumptions during those times, and then move on to something better.
I love that. In fact, I love it so much. I just put it as the title of our episode, Validate Your Assumptions. Man, I agree. I feel like I could have saved myself probably years in my personal entrepreneurial journey, trying different businesses that I thought were amazing at the time. But, you launch it and you realize, actually, that's not what people wanted. Guys, I've got links to try out PickFu use PickFu. I'll put links in the description down below this episode, but you can use the code AMZWITHANDY to get 50% off your first pull. So that's a great value right there, especially if you want to, see what it's all about, get some responses like we showed you guys, whether, it's for main image, for product development, anything you want to test, guys, go give it a try. It's very, very cool. You're going to gain a ton of insight. Everyone that I've had try it has messaged me and said, this is really cool. So I think it's going to be a huge part moving forward as well. You guys have heard me say this all the time over the past year or so that, Amazon, e-commerce, it's getting more competitive. Guys, it's getting more competitive. You just have to be that much better. You have to execute that much better if you want to be, relevant long-term. So make sure you're using all the tools that you can to get the best value. John, thank you again so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Oh, no, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Andy.
There you have it, guys. That's John Lee, the co-founder of PickFu. Like I mentioned many times, guys, there's links in the description to get you guys 50% off your first pull on PickFu. Use the code AMZWithAndy. I'm going to be using this a ton in the future. Like I said, for my own projects, for client projects, and hopefully my students can find a lot of value in this tool. I am all in on whatever we can do to make our products better, to make our listings better, to make our brands better, stand out. As competition is going to continue to increase, it's going to be a great opportunity, guys. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're doing the best we can. If you guys enjoyed this episode, if you do me a huge favor and leave me a review, if you're listening on Apple or on Spotify, reviews make all the difference to the show, help it reach more people, help us out a lot. So thank you guys so much for leaving those reviews. Once again, I'm Andy. You're listening to Selling on Amazon with Andy Isom. We'll see you in the next episode.